The scent of burnt cinnamon coffee hung thick in the kitchen air. The second Elara opened her eyes, and her throat locked up. She knew this exact moment. The scratch of the refrigerator compressor humming under the counter, the faint clink of ceramic mugs from the dining room, the sharp, overly sweet tone of her sister Lila laughing through a phone call. Every single detail ripped straight out of the worst year of her old life. She was back, 27 years old, sitting at the scuffed oak dining table in her parents' suburban home. Every brutal memory of everything that would happen still burned sharp behind her eyes. Last time around, this was where everything started to unravel. Lila's honey-toned lies had wrapped the whole family around her finger. Her once closest friend Maren had stood right beside Lila, smiling to Elara's face while she quietly helped steal the promotion Elara had spent 3 years fighting for, leaked her private fears to the family to paint her as bitter and ungrateful, and slowly stripped away every chance Elara had to build something for herself. By the end of that time, Elara had lost her career, her savings, and any real sense of belonging within her own blood family. She'd watched Lila walk away with the family's approval, the inheritance, and even Maren's unwavering loyalty, while Elara was written off as angry, unstable, too difficult to. Now she was standing at the very beginning of that downward spiral, and she was not going to let it repeat. Elara's fingers curled tight around the edge of the table until her knuckles. She forced her breathing. Rage roared hot under her, but reckless outbursts would only play right into Lila's head. Lila thrived when Elara. Every outburst got twisted into proof that Elara was unreal, that Lila was the gentle, wronged. So Elara kept her face, masking the storm churning in. Lila ended, setting her smartphone face down on, and turned toward Elara with that concerned smile that had fooled everyone for some. "You seem so quiet," tilted, voice warm and laced with. "Is work stress getting in? You shouldn't push yourself hard. Mom was saying last night you ought to slow down, stop chasing such big goals that just..." Elara laughed. That was the opening move, exactly as. Plant the idea that Elara's ambition was selfish. Frame Lila as the caring, reasonable sister looking out for being. Last time Elara had got offensive, back, and given Lila exactly. This time Elara simply lifted her coffee mug and took a sip, meeting Lila's gaze. "Fine. Work is going really actually. The regional manager position is still on." A microscopically fast flicker of irritation crossed Lila's features before it vanished behind her mask. Allowed it. No one else in the. Their mother wandered the hallway, wiping her hands on her. "Good, with up. Maren is stopped in an hour. She said she has exciting news to you." Ice spread the chest. Maren, right on schedule. In the timeline, this visit was where Maren first told the family she was being considered for that sentinel role. What no one knew then was Maren had already secretly collabed with Lila, passing along Elara's pride from work, using Elara's own ideas to strengthen. Elara had greeted her best arms, completely blind to the knife already at her back. Her first instinct to scream, to lay all the out on the table, expose both or everyone. But she pulls back. Without proof, it would only look like bitter rage. She could not blow everything up. She quietly pick apart Lila's manipulated by thread, plant small seeds of death in families' minds, and keep her enemies from seeing she knew every single. After their room again, Lila leaned across the table, hurting. "I hope Maren's new motion. It would hurt so much if you got your heart. Maybe you should step back, else take that spot. Your friendship with Maren is far more than any job." There it was again, gently nudging Elara under what she had earned, under the guise. Before Elara could doorbell chime, sharp, clear, through the entryway. Elara's stomach twisted. Maren had arrived. The wound ached fresh. She knew what was coming next. Bright smiles, warmth, fake camaraderie, all while the ball already in motion. But Elara was no girl who would fall for it. She took her chair back and stood up, her expression calm, though her heart in her ears. Lila was moving toward the front door, their guest. Elara followed a few steps by, her mind racing. This was the first real test. If she misplayed this moment, everything would go wrong all over again. Yet if she played it right, she could start to unravel the ruin that had defined her entire former life. She could feel the weight of all those painful memories pressing down close to the door, wondering exactly how much damage she could undo before anyone suspected she was no longer the person they remembered. Maren stepped across the threshold carrying a paper bakery bag, sunlight spilling over her shoulders through the open front door. Her grin was warm, the same easy smile Elara had once associated with late-night wine nights, bad breakup rants, and every quiet secret she'd ever shared. Just like in the old life, she pulled Elara into a tight hug, her perfume wrapping around Elara in a familiar, sickening cloud of jasmine. Elara forced herself to return the embrace, keeping her body relaxed, not letting the revulsion show on her face. Last time she'd melted into this hug, relieved to have her closest friend beside her. Now every touch touch felt like a performance. "Look at you," Maren said, pulling back, holding Elara by both shoulders as she studied her face. "I feel like I haven't gotten to sit and catch up in forever. Work has been absolutely eating me alive lately." Lila closed the front door behind them, shutting out the bright suburban morning, and steered everyone toward the living room. Soft throw pillows dotted the fabric couch, and the television sat muted in the corner. Their mother followed them in, settling into the armchair by the window, clearly eager for Maren's big announcement. Elara sank onto one end of the sofa, watching the two people who'd destroyed her former life exchange a almost imperceptible glance. That tiny split-second look told Elara everything. They had already coordinated what they would say before Maren even walked through this house. Maren set the bakery bag down on the coffee table and leaned forward, hands folded in her lap. "Oh, I can't hold it in any longer. I interviewed for that regional manager the one Elara's also going for, and they gave me a formal." Their mother gasped, immediately leaning in with excitement. "Oh, Maren, that's wonderful. I'm so proud." Lila clapped, her eyes drifting over toward her, watching closely for any flash of hurt or... In her past time, Elara's shock had cracked into raw disappointment. She'd argued that she had more senior, and everyone had written her reaction off as petty. Lila had then spent the rest of the weekend telling family members how crushed Elara was that her friend had beaten her out for... That single moment had planted the first big seed that Elara and could not stand seeing other people. Elara schooled her features into a soft, neutral... She nodded. That role would be such a big step for... Surprise flickered across both Maren's and Lila's. Neither of them had expected her to react with quiet grace, and Maren fumbled for a second, clearly thrown off by the lack of conflict she had been ending. "Thank you," she said, recovering. "I honestly didn't think I stood much. I got really lucky." Elara bit back the sharp retort tongue. Luck had not. Maren had gotten hold of Elara's private notes, the ones she'd shown Maren in confidence ago, and rebuilt her entire interview pitch using Elara. Lila had pushed Maren to go audition, feeding her little pieces of information about how Elara prepared. But Elara had zero heart right now. Accusing them would... Lila jumped silence, her tone gentle. "It really is amazing. I know how hard Elara has worked toward that promotion. It must sting a little, right, Elara? You can..." She weighed her, coaxing her hurt, so they could frame. Elara nodded her head. "Of course I'm disappointed myself. I've put hours in, but being upset for my own reasons doesn't mean I can't be..." "When do you have to give a final answer?" "Next week," Maren answered, still looking unsettled by Elara. Conversation drifted to lighter chat. They talked about gossip. A local grocery store was down. Plans for an dinner. All the while observant. She watched how Lila conversation, how she subtly steered. She noticed Maren kept checking to the table, sending quick... Elara suspected she was updating Lila about how strangely well Elara was. When Maren finally said her an hour later, "We should grab dinner sometimes, just the two of us," suggested. Maren blinked, clearly expecting the invitation. "Absolutely. Love that," Maren replied, forcing voice. Once the front door behind Maren, the friendly atmosphere in that dissolved instantly. Lila found alone in the hallway, her mother's earshot. Her soft, polite mapped just a fraction. "You took amazingly well," Lila said, her voice lower around the edges. "Wouldn't I?" Finally. Most people would be hurt watching their best friend land so badly. Lila's eyes narrowed. "I hope you aren't truly feel. Bottling everything for you." Subtle warning. A reminder of how everyone had painted her as if. But Elara could respond. Her fuck it. A work group popped up on the screen. Human Resources was opening internal investigation. Multiple complaints had come in, accusing someone of leaking confidential interview preparation material of authorized staff. Elara's breath caught. The timeline. Someone at corporate had caught wind, gotten out. The problem was, no one knew exactly who was responsible. Lila's head snapped over when she noticed a change in expression. "Everything okay?" Lila asked, thick in her tone. She locked her phone screen. A quiet cold settled inside her chest. The invest could become her opening. It was also a massive risk. If Lila or Maren managed to twist things, Elara herself could end up under suspicion. Lila was watching her closely, already picking up a shift in her behavior, trying to figure out what had changed. Nothing was safe anymore, and the fragile surface peace they had maintained morning was already cracking apart. Elara retreated to the spare bedroom upstairs, shutting the door softly behind her so their mother would not overhear. Sunlight filtered through sheer window curtains, dust motes drifting across the old faded wallpaper. She leaned her back against the solid wood door and exhaled a long, shaky breath. Her hand still trembled slightly. The HR investigation had arrived far earlier than she recalled from her previous life. In that broken timeline, the leak complaints had surfaced weeks later, only after Maren had formally accepted the regional manager position. Now it landed while Maren still held the option to turn the offer down entirely. That small shift opened a door, but it also piled dangerous pressure onto every choice she made. She pulled out her phone and reread the company email slowly. HR would interview staff who had access to the interview prep file. They warned that anyone found passing confidential internal materials to external or unauthorized parties faced termination. No names were named, no specific suspects flagged. Elara understood exactly how easily this could backfire. Lila had no official ties to her workplace, but Maren could spin a believable lie. She could claim Elara herself had carelessly shared the note, framing Elara as the one responsible for. If that story, Elara would lose her job before she even got a chance to fight for the promotion. A soft knock tapped against the bedroom. Elara, you've been up here for ages. It was Lila's, sweet and the mask firmly back in place. Elara's jaw. She had no real privacy in this. She pushed off the door and stepped. Just going over some work. Give me. Quickly, she locked the phone screen and tucked it deep inside her jeans before she twisted the doorknob. Lila stood in the hallway holding 2 glasses of ice, one extended toward her. Expression read as concerned, caring older. Mom mentioned you seemed distracted after me. I thought you might work. I know that job, even if you tried not to show it down. Elara accepted this, her fingers brushing the cold condensation on the side. She knew what. She hoped to coax Elara into venting frustration about Maren, and any frustrated comment could later be twisted and repeated to her, or even passed along indirectly to people at Elara. I'm not upset about Maren's. Elara said. Work just got complicated and. Lila her head, her eyes searching for cracks in Elara's jaw. How? Something bad happened? Elara refused to feed her. If Lila learned about the HR now, she would warn Marley, giving them both time to align their lies and cracks. Nothing sort out, he answered, taking a. Lila's smile faltered. She had expected Elara to confide in her. Denied that window, she. You know you can always right? I hate seeing you carry. And soft, almost hurt. Sometimes I worry you push everyone away. It was the same manipulation Elara. Paint Elara as isolated, closed off, while positioning Lila as the only person willing to stand her. Last time, Elara had felt guilty over keeping secrets. This time, she just offered a faint, appreciately. But I need to handle this. Defeated in information, Lila soon made an excuse and once she was gone, Elara sat on the narrow spare bed. She could write to HR, but she possessed tangible proof. All she held was foreknowledge from another life. That sounded like paranoia. She could not walk in and say, I know what will happen because he lived this. That would get her conference room. And she knew of it might sit. Months prior, she had emailed her full interview planning document to her personal cloud drive home. Maren had borrowed top for an evening, back when completely. Maren copied that file then. If Elara could pull up the exact time's file access, she would have something jar. But her laptop sat inside her apartment across town. She had stayed over for the weekend, never anticipating how viral. She grabbed her off the small dresser. Their mother sat in the vision. I'm heading place for a few hours. I need to finish. Are you coming back for dinner? Called after her. Probably not. Elara replied over her shoulder. Stood in the kitchen door, watching her leave. There wasn't her gaze anymore, only calculating suspicion. Elara could read her thoughts. What rushing off to do? What was she hiding? The drive across the suburbs felt endless. Crawled along the main road. Every red light gave ink over the risks. Retrieving the dog was her best chance. But if Maren realized what she was hunting for, they would destroy it. When she pulled into the lot of her apartment, her phone buzzed. It tapped up from an unknown number. No chilling line. You don't need over. Blood ran cold. Knew she was investigating. Either Maren had sent the warning. They were one step to realizing she was onto them. Fingers hovered over the screen. Whoever sent this may be watching for her next move. She sat in the idling car, stairs leading to her unit, fully aware every step she took from this point carried consequences. The quiet passive phase was ending. She had chosen to fight back. The fight had already begun. Elara sat frozen in the driver's seat, the glow of her phone screen painting her knuckles pale. The anonymous text hung on the display, sharp and unmistakable. She considered firing off a reply, demanding to know who had sent it, then thought better of it. Any angry message would give them exactly what they wanted. Proof she felt rattled, ammunition they could twist later. She took a deep breath and deleted the text without responding. The though every nerve in her body hummed with unease. Whoever had sent it knew she was digging. It could only be Lila or Maren. The question was how they had found out she planned to look for evidence. She had said almost nothing back at her parents' house. Had Lila slipped into the spare bedroom while she was downstairs, scrolling through her unlocked phone? Or had Maren planted some kind of tracking app ages ago, back when they had still been inseparable best friends? Possibilities swirled in her head, each one more unsettling than the last. She killed the car engine and climbed out into the warm, late-afternoon air of the apartment complex. Stairwell doors clanged in the distance. A neighbor's dog barked somewhere down the road. She kept her hand wrapped tight around her, eyes scanning the parking, half expecting to spot Maren's sedan or Lila's small hatchback parked among the rows of vehicles. There was no sign, yet Elara could not shake the feeling she was being watched. Up inside her quiet second-floor, she flipped on the overhead light and hurried over to her laptop sitting on the kitchen counter. She pressed the power button, tapping her foot impatiently while the system booted. Her mind raced over the cloud storage access log that would show when Maren's device had opened and downloaded her confidential interview. If she could pull that time, she would have something tangible to bring to aid, not just vague suspicion rooted in memories of another. The laptop finished. She pulled up her cloud account settings and navigated to security. Her stomach. The entry she had been counting on, the record showing that old late-night ass, the one linked to Maren's borrowed, had been scrubbed. Someone had gotten into her cloud account and Elara sank onto the kitchen, cold disappointment washing. Her one solid lead finished. She reread every remaining log entry, hoping she had it, but there was no drift. They had moved faster than she had ended. The anonymous warning had not just been intended. It had been a din, buying them time to destroy the evidence. Panic pricked. Without that stamp, her case against Maren felt. HR would not act on nothing more than Elara's word against two people who could paint her as bitterless. She forward, elbows rest on her, trying to think through her phone. This time it was a real name popping up on the Jude, her closest member, one of the few people who had stood by her side in the previous. Elara, I just got pulled, said, his voice quiet and tense. They're interviewing everyone who worked on the regional manager candidates. Maren already. She told them she got inspired for her interview pitch from casual office questions. Never saw any. Your name. Said you were stressed and worried you might have accidentally left documents visible on your work laptop or. Elara. Exactly the feared. Maren was already planting the narrative that Elara herself. Did they you about me? Asked. They did, Jude replied. I told them I never saw you leave files out. But Elara, a couple other coworkers buying her story. Some people already think you're upset over the promotion. Word is spreading. A heavy silence across the call. Elara had counted her ally, but she heard the faint hesitation. Even he could start doubting her if Maren and Lila. Her most reliable support. After hanging up, she paced a room. Thing was slipping. Was erased. Her reputation attack at work, and she could not tell anyone the truth. She knew what she knew. She found herself circling her thought. What if she wanted Lila directly? If she pushed hard enough, would Lila slip up and say something emanating in anger? Blinded by frustration, she grabbed her keys again and drove straight back toward the house. She told her she would stay calm, that she would only press, but hurt and her judgment. She did not stop to consider that Lila might be waiting for her to snap. Through the front door, the house smelled of roastables. Was in the kitchen. Lila sat alone in the dining on her phone. The second Elara stormed inside, her lips curling smile. She had expected Elara to come. Took you long enough, Lila said softly, her phone face down. Did you find whatever you apartment? Elara's temper flared. To my cloud account. Her mother poked her kitchen, confused. Elara, what are you yelling about? Lila did instantly. Turned wide and wounded. What you're talking about. Why would I touch accounts? She stood up, voice lifted toward their mother. About Maren's job offer? You're starting to scare me. You've been on edge all day. In one terrible instant, Elara realized her mistake. She had marched in without proof, and Lila was always against her. She walked straight into the trap. The rift in family widened right in front of her. Her mother stared with concern clouding her face. Already Lila's performance. Elara had meant to expose manipulation, yet only made herself look unhinged. Elara froze mid-sentence inside the dining room, the weight of her blunder crashing over her. Her mother lingered in the kitchen doorway, brows drawn tight, that familiar worried look spreading across her face, the exact same look from the old timeline, the one that always preceded conversations about Elara needing to calm down, to stop letting stress get the better of her. Lila stood there, shoulders hunched slightly, eyes glistening as if she had just been genuinely startled by Elara's sharp accusation. It was an award-worthy performance, honed over years of practicing exactly this kind of quiet, emotional manipulation. I didn't touch anything of yours, Lila repeated, her voice soft and shaky. I don't even know how to get into your cloud account. Why would I want to? This feels like it's coming out of nowhere. Elara bit back, every retort burning in her throat. Arguing further would only dig the hole deep. Any more raised voices, any more unproven accusation, and she would cement the narrative Lila was so carefully built. She drew in a slow, painful, forcing the heat out of her tone. I've been under enormous pressure with... I shouldn't have spoken that. The apology hung heavy in her mother's... Why don't you go sit upstairs for a little while? You look worn. We can talk about this later when everyone's heads are... It was not... It was gentle, treating Elara as someone too overwrought to have a reasonable conversation. Elara nodded and turned toward the stairs, her cheek up in the spare room. She shut the door and leaned at it, hand. She had let frustration cloud her, handed Lila a huge victory on a silver. The evidence, her ally Jude, her own mother now viewed her with quiet sin. For a long moment she sank on, swallowed by bleak hope. Maybe she could not change anything. Maybe she was doomed to repeat every piece of the old suffering no matter. Her phone by bed. It was a text, short-hearted. HR wants to interview you morning. They've already got statements from Maren and several others. Be careful. Elara day. If she walked into that interview with nothing except Maren's frame of stick, she shared. She pulled up contacts, slowly, trying to think of anyone who might hold another friend. Most people were either to Maren, neutral, or had no knowledge of. Then one, Cassie, a former co-worker who had left the company. Life. Elara had forgotten all about Cassie until long after every. Months later, Cassie had mentioned over drinks that Maren had one night, panicking, asking questions about how cloud storage permission settings could be. Back then, Elara had not understood what that conversation really meant, but clicked. Maren had reached out to Cassie to learn how to wipe us logs. Cassie had thought time, but she still remembered that strange. Cassie was a smoking gun, was a witness, someone who could cast reasonable doubt on Maren's claim that she had never Hope flickered. As a catch, Cassie and Lila had kept in loose social contacts. Lila occasionally sent her casual media messages. If Cassie feared bridges with Lila, she refused to speak up. Elara pulled up Cat and hesitated. She had to try anyway. She typed a careful text, asking if they could meet coffee Sunday morning. Record. She kept it vague, did not lay out all fears in writing, knowing texts could be screenshot. Downstairs, she heard Lila's voice rising, but distinct, carrying through the floors. On her phone, Elara pressed her ear like a door. Not catch every word. Doubt enough. She's really unraveling. Our interview Monday. Just hoping reckless. Lila was priming someone, most likely Maren, preparing for what would happen at court 2 days. Lila was interview. And again, Cassie had written back. Sunday 10 a.m. the Down Corner Cafe. I can spare what I need to warn you. Reached out to me yesterday. She told me you'd probably be reaching out with some work-related drama. She said I should be careful. Mess. At Elara's chest. Lila hated this move too. She had got to Cassie ahead of time, planting warnings to poison Cassie again even met. This typical mid-turn of the fight. Elara found a potential witness, yet Lila realized her. Elara room floor. The meat still her only shot. Cassie was already pre-warned, primed to Elara might say. If she handled the coffee conversation, alienate Cassie completely, and she truly would have no one left. Outside the bedroom window, twilight painted urban rooftops deep in. The house grew quiet, yet Elara Lila's presence below, pulling strings behind every wall. She had thought uncovering Cassie would be her breakthrough. Instead, it drove home how outmaneuvered she was. Lila was always one step ahead. Coffee would make or break everything, and failure meant to ruin at Monday's HR hearing. The faint gray light of Sunday morning seeped through the bedroom curtains before Elara had slept more than a handful of hours. Her mind had spun all night, replaying every wrong turn, the erased cloud logs, her impulsive outburst in front of her mother, Lila getting to Cassie first. There was no way to predict how the coffee meeting would go. Cassie might shut down the second Elara started talking, convinced she was stepping into some messy, one-sided family drama. She got dressed quietly and slipped out of her parents' house before anyone else was fully awake. She did not want Lila intercepting her, or pressing for details about where she was headed. The drive downtown felt heavy. Morning traffic rolled slow, sunlight glinting off car windshield. When she pulled into a street-side parking spot near the corner cafe, she sat in the parked car for several minutes, mentally rehearsing what she could and could not say. She could not mention living through this whole timeline once before. That would make Cassie write her off as unhinged. She could only work with scattered facts, small pieces of observation, and hope Cassie would trust her read of the situation. Inside the cafe, the air smelled of freshly ground coffee and warm croissant. Soft jazz hummed over the speaker. Cassie was already seated at a small table near the front window, paper coffee cup in her hand. Her expression was good. No easy smile to greet Elara when she sat. Lila's preemptive warning had clearly landed. Thanks for agreeing to Elara, keeping her voice low so nearby tables could not over. I know Lila reached out. Cassie nodded, stirring sugar into her black. She said you'd come to me with accusations against, that you're stressed over a lost promotion and looking for someone to. I don't want to get dragged into office drama. I left that company to get away from all the back. Elara's chest. Lila's framing had already taken. She leaned forward, choosing her words with extreme. I'm not here asking you to pick sides. I just need to know what that phone call with Maren, the one where she asked you about remote cloud storage settings back 3. You told me about it once over. Paused, her brows drawn together. For a long moment she gaze drifting out toward the busy walk. I do remember. Maren sounded really. She kept asking how someone could delete access history without At the time I thought she was dealing with some messy personal fix-up. It never crossed my mind it might tie into stolen work. Elara's did. That was exactly the did. That call happened right around the time my private interview document. Maren is telling HR she never files. If you tell investigators asked you, it creates doubt. It wing. But it keeps them from just taking her. But her head, leaning her chair, do that. Lila and I still run in some of the same circles. If I give this to HR, everyone spoke to you. Lila will make my life miserable. I don't want to be caught in the middle. Disappointment, Cora. Her only remaining witness was refused forward. She pushed. Urgent. Cassie, if HR rules against me, I'm fired. On the line. I'm sorry, he said firmly. Truly am. But this much risk for me. I will a formal statement. I won't go on record. I'm only privately. They were changing her mind. After a few more awkward minutes, they finished their call, parted ways. Elara walked back out onto the city sidewalk, bright morning sun hollow. Every path tried had closed off. Evidence destroyed. Witnessing to testify. Her mother already emotional state. Her workplace reputation being quieted behind her back. Even Jude could limited support, afraid of damaging his company. By the time she drove back toward the suburban neighborhood, she sat in her parked car from her parents' house, staring out at houses. In the old line she had broken here, shamed, begged, tried to convince everyone deeper. This time she could collapse publicly, but she had all weapons left. Possessed was memory, observation, and a clear understanding of exactly how. She stepped inside the house, the quiet hum of Sunday dawned her. Her mother's living room. Lila sat on rolling social media. Lila glanced the second Elara entered and read her face. A faint, almost imperceptible flicker of Lila's features. She knew Elara's Cassie had failed. Where were you this? Her mother asked, half distracted in her lap. Just out clearing my head, Elara answered flatly. She did not have the detailed lie. She headed upstairs to the spare bedroom, shut herself inside onto the bed. The full point settled over her. Outside help was gone. Witness would not cooperate. Proof had been erased. The murder interview loomed closer, and on the table. For hours she sat there, turning over both timelines. She could not beat them with outside wit or deleted digital log. She knew their weaknesses. She knew how Maren tended to slip up when she was expected pressure. Lila's greatest blind spot. She could not resist taking her own clever manipulations when to hold her accountable. External allies had fallen away, riding in to rescue her. If going to defend herself on Monday, she would have to do it using nothing except her understanding of how her enemy. Her fear remained sharp, but beneath the hopelessness, a quiet resolve began to solidify. She would walk into that HR room defeated. She would go in knowing every carefully constructed lies. Sunday evening slipped into quiet, gray dusk. The house grew still as their mother turned in early for bed, leaving Elara and Lila alone downstairs. Soft lamplight pooled across the hardwood floors, casting long shadows behind the furniture. Lila sat at the kitchen counter sipping herbal tea, her phone laid face up beside her, periodically glancing over at Elara with the quiet satisfaction of someone who believed the fight was already over. She thought Elara was broken, beaten by the loss of evidence and Cassie's refusal to testify. That misjudgment would become Elara's greatest opening. Elara did not argue, did not snap, did not feed Lila any more ammunition. Instead, she sat on the living room couch, scrolling casually through her own phone, while she mentally mapped out every detail of the upcoming Monday HR interview. She could not bring logs or witness statements. What she could bring was the exact timeline of Maren's lies, the gaps in her story, the small specific inconsistencies only someone who had lived through the full sequence would know. Maren had built her entire alibi around the claim she had only absorbed ideas from casual office chat. Elara intended to force her to elaborate, to dig into specifics she could not possibly answer truthfully. Later that night, locked away in the spare bedroom, she pulled out a notebook and jotted down every fragile point she could recall. The exact date Maren had borrowed her laptop, the exact week she had begun interviewing for the regional, the phrasing Maren had used in her original interview, pulled almost verbatim from Elara's private draft. None of these items counted as proof on their, but stacked together. They could plant enough reasonable to make HR dig, instead of simply rubber stamping Maren's version of events. Shortly before, her phone lit up with a text from. He had overheard Maren on a work call earlier that afternoon. Maren was planning to tell HR that Elara had been obsessive about the promotion. So consumed by ambition, she had grown paranoid of anyone standing in her. Maren also planned to mention Elara's explosive outburst at her parents' house on, painting it as further proof of emotional instability. Elara read the message, then locked in. She had expected every piece of her private family conflict was going to be dragged into the corporate conference room to ruin her. Monday morning arrived cold and over. Elara got up before. She dressed in a crisp neutral, kept her makeup updated, and drove toward the corporate office. Glass and steel loomed above the busy downtown. Her hands shook slightly on the wheel, but her mind was sharp, calm. She was no longer chasing irretrievable physics. She was going to force Maren to trip over her own fabric. The HR suite sat on the fluorescent lighting overhead. A receptionist led her into a small windowless room. 2 HR representatives sat, a middle-aged man, Ryan, and a woman, a thin manila folder between them, stuffed with collect. Maren's typed a cap. Elara could see her name mentioned multiple times. Ryan opened the formally, explaining the purpose of the leak. Multiple confidential interview preparation documents were circulated outside. Maren Hale had her account. Several co-workers have noted recent tension between you and Maren regarding the regional opening. We need you thing. Elara sat upright, voice steady, no anger, but pleading. She did not open by her accusations. Instead, she laid out her own timeline by fact. She described creating the detailed interview drafts earlier. She mentioned lending her personal laptop to Maren for one. She noted Maren had begun reference specific, unique ideas from that exact draft once her own interview. Elara, Maren states she never accessed any private thing to you. She says all her concepts came from discussions. That you will claim, answered evenly. But many of those concepts were never discussed. They were ideas on alone at home, no settings. I can walk you point by point through which sections of her interview presentation of it draft. Ideas no one else. Ryan leaned forward, pen held. Can you provide a copy draft? Elara's heart twisted. The original file on my personal cloud had its access history over the weekend. I no longer retrievable logs, but I can reconstruct every argument from memory. You can cross-reference them against the slides Maren. Outside in the hallway, through the conference room wall, Elara caught his. Maren had arrived early. Elara was speaking to someone, assured. The door swung open. Maren stepped inside, force her narrative. She had not expected Elara to counter without scream outbursts. She had prepared defensive. Instead, she walked into a room where Elara was calmly mapping the story. Panic flickered across her face for a split second. Asked. She pulled out a chair. Elara, this is unfair. Elara has been fixating this promotion for months. It's understandable she would imagine wrong. Elara met her gaze. Tell me, Maren, where exactly did you get the market penetration of the Western Territory? That specific calculation never came in any office conversation. I created on my home laptop. For a beat, Maren hesitated. She fumbled for an answer. I picked it up from brainstorming. Which said, a list. What? Who else was present? Maren sat comfortably in her seat. That had never happened. The representatives noticed her hesitation. The small room began to shift. Maren's polished, unassailable story was starting to calm questioning. Buzzed inside her purse. A text notification lit up the screen to everyone sitting around the table. The preview popped. It was from the stick to the script. Her questions fell over the conference room. Ryan and Tamara both saw Maren's fave color. Lila, who held no connection with company or this investigation, was mid-interview. That single visible text shattered the credibility of Maren. This was purely an office born out of Elara's jealousy. Elara had not planned for this moment, but she recognized it as the crack she had been waiting for. Maren scrambled to flip her purse over, pressing her phone face down against the fabric before any more message previews could show. But the damage was already done. Ryan and Tamara exchanged a sharp, quiet glance, the kind that told Elara they had registered every word of Lila's text. Stick to the script. The phrase hung heavy in the air of the windowless conference room, impossible to unsee. It's nothing, Maren stammered, her cheeks burning bright red. Just my sister-in-law checking in, making sure I'm doing okay through this stressful meeting. Tamara leaned forward, her tone measured but pointed. Your sister-in-law has no employment ties to this company. Why would she send you instructions about how to answer questions in a confidential internal investigation? Maren's mouth opened and closed. She had no believable reply. All the careful polish she had brought into the room crumbled away. Elara stayed silent, holding back from jumping into any triumphant remark could make the HR team write her off as indignant, so she simply sat still and let Maren dig her own hole. Ryan flipped through the stack of witness statements spread out on the table. Earlier you told us this conflict arose purely from workplace competition. Now we see an outside party sending you real-time guidance during our interview. Can you explain the full nature of your relationship with Lila? Pressure closed in on her. She could no longer pretend Lila was only a casual, distant acquaintance. She admitted they had been talking frequently in the weeks leading up to the promotion interviews. She tried to frame it as emotional nothing, but her evasive body language undermined everything. The HR team could sense there was far more beneath her partial anger. The interview wrapped shortly after. HR would not render an immediate. They told both women they would review all circumstantial, cross-check Maren's interview slides against Elara's reconstructs, and follow up within 3 business. As they stepped out into the glass wall, Maren shot Elara a bitter fury. She knew her carefully constructed alibi had cracked. Elara walked out of the corporate building into bright midday, her legs weak with nervous exhaustion. The accidental text had shifted, yet it was still only circumstance proof. HR could still choose not it. Nothing need. She pulled out her phone and saw multiple missed calls. She declined one. She was not ready to hear Lila's excuses or her attempts to twist what had happened inside that. By the time she drove back toward her parents' house, afternoon rain had fallen, streaking across the shield. When she stepped through the door, Lila was waiting for her anyway. She had paced a worn path across boards, her usual soft smile. The mask had found a way. No more concern, no hurt performance. Raw frustration. You had no right to corner that, Lila said, voice sharp. You humiliated her. I didn't do anything except answer questfully. You're the one sending real-time scripting texts into a corporation. What happen? Their mother wandered in the kitchen, drawn by the sharp. What is going on, you two? I can't keep walking fights. Spun toward her, switching back to victim mode. Elara is convinced Maren's promotion. She dragged all this into her work, is distraught. For the first time, she had seen Elara Saturday, had bought much of performance, but something about Lila's unguarded anger gave her. She did not rush to take it away. I need to hear both sides. It was a small crowdly dynamic mattered. Lila noticed it too, and it irritated. Realizing she could no longer fully mother's opinion, she retreated upstairs, slamming the bed. Later that evening, Elara got a surprise. She had been replaying Elara's coffee all day, seeing social media posts from Maren complaining about unfair place persecution to the edge. She still refused to submit an official signed HR statement that could social circles, but she told Elara she would take a recorded phone to the investigators, on strict condition her name never appeared in any company documents. She would speak on record anonymous, caught. Not perfect, but it was hoped for. Cassie's anonymous account about Maren's cloud storage phone call would add critical weight to circumstantial evidence. Elara relayed the offer directly to Ryan that encrypted email. Ryan confirmed HR would accept an anonymous interview. While Elara took relief in this small win, she understood life easily. That night, scrolling social media before bed, she stumbled onto a series of vague, cryptic Lila's account. Elara outright. But she wrote about family consumed by resentment, who would destroy other people's future unprocessed jealousy. Mutual friends from their years were commenting. Replies. Lila was quietly mere campaign online, shaping how their shared circle saw Elara, preparing for the worst-case outcome was against Maren. Card. She lost the corporate fight. She intended to make sure Elara would pay in revenue. Elara on the nightstand. The battle was not over. Lila was ready to burn down their shared life as retaliation. Whatever HR decided in the coming days, there would be lasting consequences. Victory waiting for her. She could win back her career, yet still end up fractured friends. The cost of winning over her as she lay awake, dark ceiling. Final showdown was drawing near, and neither side completely unharmed. 3 slow, tense days dragged by after the HR interview. Rain kept rolling over the suburbs, gray and unrelenting, matching the heavy mood hanging over Elara's parents' house. Lila barely spoke to her, keeping most of her communications confined to private phone calls and closed-door conversations. Their mother wandered the home quiet and withdrawn, torn between her daughters, unable to pretend everything could go back to normal. The old, comfortable family harmony was already dead, and no final ruling from HR would bring it back. Elara kept checking her work email every hour. Ryan and Tamara had received Cassie's anonymous recorded statement the day prior. On the 3rd afternoon, the official message landed in her inbox. HR had completed their full investigation. They requested her presence at corporate headquarters first thing the next morning, alongside Maren. No hint, no advance clues about which way the decision would fall. That same evening, tension boiled over inside the house. A family dinner sat half-eaten on the dining room table. Plates of cold pasta sat untouched. Lila's social media posts had spread. Several mutual high school friends had texted asking careful questions about what had happened between Lila and Maren. Whispers had leaked into their shared socials, just as Lila had. Their mother set down her fork with a sharp clink against her ceramic. I can't stand this silence anymore. Something has to change. All of this secrecy and fighting is eating this family. She turned toward Lila. I saw your post. You never name her, but everyone knows exactly who you are talking about. That is not how you resolve conflict, Lila's joined. I was just venting my. I have every right to talk about how. Vent to their mother ripply. Don't plant stories for all our food. You are painting one of your own sisters as bitter and destructive without ever laying out For the time, Lila could not charm her way out of the conversation. Her mother was no longer willing to accept her carefully edited version of reality. Frustration rolled over, and Lila dropped every last piece of her gentle, caring. You always wanted Elara to come up. Snapped. All my life I've watched you praise Vision, celebrate every witness. When I try to help my friend grab me, suddenly a villain. Maren deserved that promotion just as much. Elara leaned forward table. She stole my original work to build a view pitch. You helped her. You erased logs. You sent her live instructions mid-view. You warned Cassie before I could eat. Would you have let either of us fairly back? You were going to take that region spot, and Maren never would have gotten it. I did what I had to do for the. Their mother stared at Lila, stunned by an admission. No truths, no more innocence. Lila was not even trying to deny her anymore. She believed her terrified. The dinner table dissolved shock. Lila realized what she had just said, hailed. She had let her temper pull the trout into the open, their own home. She pushed her chair back hard against the hardwood floor and up to her bedroom, slamming the door so hard. The next morning, Elara drove back to the office. Her stomach twisted tight knots. When she walked the HR suite, Maren was already in his room. Her usual was gone. Dark under her eyes. She had seen Lila's social media fallout and understood praying. Everyone was seated, beak. He laid HR's full findings. They cross-referenced Elara's reconstructed notes against interview slides. Multiple unique, unreleased matched precisely. Combined with the anonymous witness account about the cloud storage inquiry and Lila's re-interview text message, the weight of circumstance overwhelming. Maren had violated company policy by accessing and leveraging material. The formal job offer for manager was rescinded. She received a written disciplinary mark on an employee record. The process would reopen, and Elara would be candidate. HR confirmed there was no evidence supporting the claim that Elara leaked her own documents. The frame-up was officially dismissed, hung heavy in the room. Maren motionless for a long moment, absorbing the verdict. Tears welled in her eyes. Plotting had collapsed. She looked over toward Elara, a mix of shame across her face. I thought I could make it work. I convinced chances already. There was no more denial left. When the meeting concluded, Maren left without another word. Elara stayed behind for a few extra minutes as Tamara gave her paperwork about the opened promotion process. Drive back toward the suburb, relief washed over, felt hollow. She had cleared her name at work, won the compete fairly for the role, but she knew nothing had broken inside her friendship. Driveway. But even turn off the car engine, out onto the front porch. She had over one shoulder. Her expression was empty, stripped of all manipulation. Stood in the doorway behind her, eyes glistening. I can't stay here, Lila said when Elara climbed out of the car. Thing I admitted last night. There is no going to how things used to be between us. I booked a term rental apartment across town. I need space away from you. She hesitated for one beat, as if she wanted to say some kind of apology. Never came. She walked down the porch steps and drove away. Elara stood in the driveway, disappeared down the street. She had defeated the manipulative, cleared her reputation, tasted bittersweet. The conflict had reached its decisive, but deep wounds remained. Damage could not simply be erased. She turned toward her, where her mother waited for her, and understood the hardest thing against Lila and Maren. It would be everything that came after. 4 weeks drifted past after Lila loaded her duffel into her car and drove away from the family home. The heavy spring rain had cleared, replaced by soft golden sunlight that spilled over suburban rooftops and turned the neighborhood lawns bright green. Elara split her time between her small downtown apartment and occasional quiet visits to her mother's house. She no longer slept in that cramped spare bedroom where so much of her fear had taken root. Being back in her own space helped her untangle the tangled weight carried over from 2 separate lives. The regional manager promotion process reopened as HR had promised. Elara went through the interviews all over again, this time without hidden sabotage or stolen work hanging over her. She did not win the position. Another candidate from a different branch of the company received the role. For a brief moment, disappointment pricked at her chest. But this loss felt different. There were no behind-the-scenes plots, no stolen note, no best friend stabbing her in the back. She had competed fairly, laid every skill and idea out on the table, and she could live with whatever outcome came. Jude pulled her aside after the final results were announced and told her she had impressed the hiring panel deeply. Leadership had marked her for high-priority future opening. Her reputation inside the company was solid once. Maren still worked at the same office. Their paths crossed in break rooms and by the elevator banks every few days. They never. Sometimes their eyes would meet for half a second, and Elara would read quiet shame in Maren's expression. There would be no heartfelt reconciliation, no tear-filled apology that fixed it. The friendship they had built over years of late-night wine and shared was gone beyond her. Elara grieved that, but she no longer carried burner. She understood Maren had let greed and insecurity twist her, yet she could not force herself to forgive. She simply chose to let that chapter. Lila kept her. She rented a 1-bedroom apartment. She texted their mother once a week, but avoided any direct contact. They never had a big, dramatic reconciliation. There was no grand moment where Lila broke down and begged for action. Sometimes their mother would relay small. Lila had picked up B. She was struggling to adjust to. She still believed she had only tried to. Lila could not bring herself to admit fault. Her pride would. Elara. She could not force her sister to see the harm. Healing could not happen if only one person was. One afternoon, Elara drove over to her mother's. The dining room table where so many fights had unfolded was set simply with sandwiches. No tense silence in her. Her mother's face looked less worn than it had, though sadness lingered. They sat by the kitchen window watching a pair of sparrows hop across the. I keep hoping things between you and her mother softly. But I realize now some cracks do not glue back together the. Elara nodded. I hate her, but I can't go back to pretending none of her happened. I can't trust her I once did. Maybe someday we can have some kind of gentle relationship. Not sisters as close kids. Think quieter. Right now, I need to protect. Her mother reached across the table and rested a hand lightly. You have every right to first. I spent so long trying to keep everyone family happy that I refused to see how much pain was. Later that evening, apartment, Elara sat out on a small balcony, city street in the distance. She thought about the had lived, all the heartbreak that had driven to this point, with reason intact. She had not broken thing. She had not promotion. She had not forced her sister and former best friend to give her the apology. Victory had not looked like total revenge, complete justice. Instead, like boundaries, self-respect, and the chance to move forward without again. She pulled out her phone and scruffs. Pictures of Lila as children, snapshots from with Maren. Did not delete them. Memories were real, even if in them had changed. She closed the gallery app, ending any texts. She was no longer the woman who would beg early. A soft breeze the balcony. She had stepped into this second chance terrified of repeating past. She had through erased evidence, anonymous threats, family suspicious ruin. Some battles she had won, she had to carry. Her was still unwritten. There would be new hurdles, new disappointments ahead. But this time she walked it with her eyes wide open,